Beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Proposition believes that being skilled should not come with a price tag only the privileged can afford. Yet conventional tertiary education sells the illusion that success requires a prestigious campus and a massive bank account. Even graduates from elite universities like Stanford or Harvard are struggling to find jobs that is proof that the system is broken. Meanwhile, millions of students are drowning in student debt or working jobs that don't match the degrees they paid so much for. Panels, we need a better way. We think then a permanent shift to online tertiary education gives people real skills, global networks, and access to research without draining their life savings or betting on empty promises. That is why we are proud to propose. A few things on setup. Firstly, let us crystallize what online tertiary education looks like. A, tertiary education means any form of education beyond high school. This includes things like public and private universities and training. Note that the prerequisite of a tertiary education then is to graduate high school to prove that you are eligible and have the capacity to fully take advantage of tertiary education. But B, what does the status quo currently look like? 4 things. Firstly, tertiary education is crucially needed, but not everyone has access to it because of a lack of resources. It is supposed to be based on the idea of merit where the brightest minds can access the best opportunities. But in reality, lots of intelligent people from lower income backgrounds don't even apply to the best universities because it is so costly. But secondly, if you want to go abroad, there is an issue of unreliability and lack of support from the government because you might get your visa blocked arbitrarily or without clear reason. This looks like Trump using policies as a leverage of political control where students are getting blocked from attending their dream school because their visa did not pass. Thirdly, we live in a digitalized world. Online tertiary education caters to the needs of the world in this way. But fourthly, today's students operate in terms of constructivism. That is to say that students are actually taught to build knowledge themselves rather than just absorbing it. Instructors are supposed to only be mediators to help students answer questions, but in the end they encourage students to explore how to think on their own. But see, to move it online permanently is necessary because in this way there is no going back. There is no possibility of hybrid classes. Everything is going to be online. That is to say that there is no going back without excluding the efficiencies and accessibility that have now become standard. The movement then levels the playing field. Students who previously struggled to afford accommodation or living costs can receive their education from the comforts of their own home. Finally, on setup, what is our path to victory? We will show you how we exclusively create a larger access to education, which leads to a more prosperous academic future for individuals. First argument then on why permanent online tertiary education is justified. The thesis is simple. There is an incredibly urgent need for tertiary education to be moved online in the world we live in. Higher education is increasingly a prerequisite for stable employment, and we think online education is the only way to make that promise truly accessible and meritocratic. A few layers of analysis on how we gain inherent flexibility of online learning. Firstly, we help more people to participate. A, students can watch lectures and take tests at their own time as long as they meet the deadlines. We contrast this with the opposition's world where they follow such a rigid structure of fixed lecture times and in-person tests. But B, there exists asynchronous learning where students study course material independently, or synchronous learning where students use video conferencing platforms like Zoom to interact with professors. This means that when you blend the two, which is a very common way of online learning, you actually get the net benefit that Op will claim of being able to ask questions and interact with professors. But secondly, many people are currently working double or triple jobs to make ends meet, or they even have children before having a tertiary education. Tertiary education being online helps them because of 2 reasons then. A, you can do it anytime it is convenient for you without diminishing the quality of your educational experience, but B, on self-efficacy. You go at your own pace. You aren't confined in a classroom where you have to actively listen to a lecture or else you fall behind the rest of your class. If you had an emergency to attend to during class and you had to run out of class for it, you missed the opportunity to maximize your learning. What are the impacts of this argument? Firstly, because there is such a wide range of online formats of learning, it suits anyone. You never have to sacrifice any aspect of your educational experience. You might want to study in Stanford, but you don't like to live in California. You might want to study in NYU, but you don't have the time to commit to daily classes when you have so many other responsibilities. But secondly, we are the only side that encourages the sharing of academic information. Course materials can be accessed regardless of where you are in this world. What happens then? Students become active agents in spreading knowledge. We exclusively decentralize knowledge. When you don't have to wait 4 years to complete your degree abroad, then only then you can contribute to your home country with the knowledge you have gained. Let's preempt what opposition is going to say. They might come into this debate and tell you that there is meaning in experiencing a physical tertiary education. You can meet new people, familiarize yourself with a foreign surrounding, which in and of itself may be a learning experience. But we tell you that is a luxury, not a right. No one should be denied education because they can't afford flights or housing. And let's be clear, our model does not prevent physical interaction altogether. We think blended models and local hubs can still exist. But we believe that access must come first, and rigid in-person structures make access conditional. So let's weigh this argument. Firstly, on scale, our side affects a larger magnitude of people than opposition ever will. We cater especially to those from the marginalized and underserved communities who did not have access to this education in the first place. But secondly, on agency, even if the opposition argues that classroom pressure builds like discipline, we argue that true discipline and independence are better built when learners are given autonomy and responsibility over their own education. Second argument then on why you get a larger opportunity of learning when you permanently move to online tertiary education. The thesis is simple. The opportunity of learning is currently regional based and exclusionary. We think that moving universities online makes world-class education much more inclusive. A few layers of analysis. Firstly, on accessibility. A, if you live in Indonesia, you may not have access to professors from Harvard or research from Oxford unless you physically migrate, which requires visas and $100K a year for tuition. Even national universities in rural areas often lack access to guest lecturers or up-to-date course materials. But B, when universities move online then, the structure becomes cheaper and more scalable. Reducing physical footprint allows institutions to reallocate their resources to improve their course quality. So instead of paying for physical infrastructure, you can reallocate your funds to hiring better professors and developing better courses. Second layer of analysis on how the current job market requires people to have tertiary education. A, tertiary education is costly because they are in person. They have to pay for resources like textbooks or infrastructure maintenance, including paying for Wi-Fi or water bills in large-scale universities catering to thousands or tens or hundreds of thousands of students. We think these costs get passed on to students and often serve as hard barriers for those from low-income or marginalized backgrounds. But B, we characterize the current job market as generally needing to know how technology works or having a basic understanding of post-high school education in order to earn a sustaining salary. Those who work right after high school probably can earn the minimum wage, but without further opportunities like university, they would not be able to make it much further than that. But C, traditional degrees are expensive and often outdated by the time a student actually enters the workforce. Employers now actually seek modular skill building. Online tertiary education allows for micro-credentials that are intensive, targeted certifications that directly map onto real-world industry needs. We think programs like micro-bachelors and micro-masters allow learners to build a degree piece by piece or stop when they've gained the skills that they needed. We think then that this flexibility is the only one that allows education to become responsive. But what's even more important than that, these credentials are often developed through university-industry collaboration. That means that the education is immediately useful and students don't waste years learning outdated material. They can do it simultaneously as they work and contribute to the development of their own country. What are the impacts of this argument? Firstly, only under our side you get better learning outcomes. Because on our side, students are no longer punished for where they were born and people no longer need to permanently migrate in pursuit of education. But secondly, we give more relevant education. Even if you believe in-person education has benefits, they are rendered irrelevant if most people cannot access them. So let's weigh the comparative in this argument. Firstly, opposition might come into this debate and tell you that online education risks flooding universities with less qualified students, which lowers your learning opportunities in the end, right? But we prove this wrong on two grounds. Firstly, online platforms still use rigorous assessments and filters where the performance of the individual is what actually determines their success, not just them being admitted in the course. But secondly, we reject the idea that exclusivity is the only way to preserve academic value. The value of a degree should stem from what you learn and contribute instead of how few people had the chance to try. For a more inclusive future, please propose.